So I am making the swim bottoms, but these are the scoop bottoms, but I'm not doing them reversible. I'm doing a lining, and I'm doing them the same way that other bottoms are constructed. So the only difference is that you're gonna have your main fabric, the front and the back cut out, and then you're gonna have your lining at a swim lining. And you're going to go ahead and construct these by putting them right sides together. And then once you have the right sides together, you're gonna sew the side seams. So you'll sew each side seam, and then you'll sew the crotch seam. You're going to do that on your main, and you will do the same thing on your lining. So I'm going to do that with a serger using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to sew the sides, the crotch on both, and I'll have two pieces. I have my main sewn together at the sides and the crotch, and my lining. So this is what I have now. And I'm going to put them inside each other with their wrong sides touching. So that means their right sides are out. So your wrong sides together. Your front to your front, your back to your back. And then you're gonna get some clips. And you're just gonna kind of clip some of the main points so that they match, their seams match up. And what we're going to do in the next step is baste them together. We're going to baste our leg opening, and then we're going to baste our waist area. And we're going to do this before we apply elastic. So basting is one of the most important things you can do when sewing swim, because whenever you go to put your elastic in, that swim, whenever you're trying to deal with elastic and sew swim, you're going to be very frustrated. But if you've taken the time to baste all those openings before you apply elastic to them, it will go so much more smoother, so much more smoother. I think that's one of my best tips I have for sewing with swim, is to always baste before you apply elastic. So I'm just matching these up, and then once I have that, I'm going to use just a long straight stitch, and I'm going to go all the way around the waist with a baste, and I'm going to go all along each leg opening, sewing it just evenly, one for one. I am not stretching, and I'm going to sew on the lining side just because the lining is more stable than the swim. It's not going to be as slippery. It'll be easier to sew on. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm keeping those raw edges together and sewing all along. I have basted my bottoms where the wrong sides are together, the right sides are both out. So the right side of my lining is facing me, and then the right side of my main is facing out. And all I have left to do is apply elastic, and then I'm done. So I'm going to apply elastic, and then I will turn it under and top stitch it. So whenever you're doing this style of bottoms, when you look at the size chart, you will not use the measurement that it is indicated, because that measurement is based off of the way that those are done. You will need to add 1.75 or 1 3/4 of an inch to that measurement to account for the extra that you'll need to go around and be able to overlap them. So for me, I'm making the smallest size, and that means that I need to make mine 18.5 inches long instead of the 16 3/4 of an inch that it calls for. Now, this is just for the leg opening. Your waist is still going to be the exact same as what the size chart calls for. So do not change that, or your bottoms are going to fall off. It's just the leg openings. If you use the number on the leg openings in the size chart, then the butt elastic is going to be really squinched up, and it's going to make you have I don't know what the appropriate term is. It's like muffin top, but for your butt. Man, this video is graphic. Okay, so 18.5 inches is what I'm measuring out for my leg openings. I'm going to go ahead and do my leg openings first, and then I'll cut. So that one's 18.5. This is rubber elastic. I like rubber elastic, but there's other kinds if you don't. There's definitely different qualities of rubber. I've heard people tell me about what happened when they got bad quality rubber elastic, but this is a nicer quality. Okay, so I am going to sew this on. So is what you're going to do is you're going to start, I start at the crotch seam and I overlap it just like a 1/2 inch right here. And I'm going to apply it all throughout the front piece, one for one. Like, I'm not really stretching the elastic. I'm stretching it just to make it tight to where it's even, but I'm not stretching it. So you're just applying it evenly. So all the way around. And then whenever you get into your side seam, you're going to stretch that elastic. So I have about this much remaining, and I have to make it all the way through the bottom. So I am going to be stretching it through the bottom, because you don't really want your elastic stretched through here. You only want it stretched through your bottom area. So it's different than the waist. Whenever you apply elastic to the waist, you're quartering it and you're stretching it evenly all the way around. But the leg openings, you're only wanting to stretch through the bottom area. And the reason I like to do the front first is because I am not really pinning or clipping my elastic. And so I need to know how much I need to stretch it whenever I get to the back. And so I kind of gauge it by how much I have left. So you want to overlap just about a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch over that side seam. And I'm going through my front right now. Let's make sure it's your front. Yep. So I'm going over my front first. So always just double check which way you're going. And I sew with my elastic facing up. And some people like to disengage their knife when they sew swim, and you can if you're afraid you're going to clip into your elastic, but you're not really trimming anything, so you don't need to engage. I trim sometimes, like when I was basting on them together, if for some reason it didn't match up exact, but you don't even need to do that as long as it's close enough. So I'm holding my elastic taut, but I'm not stretching it. I'm just holding it to where it's being applied evenly. And then I'm paying attention to my knife since I didn't disengage it. And now I've made it to the seam where now I'm going to be stretching it through my bottom. So once I get there, I'm going to look and see how much I have left to go. And then I'm going to stretch that. And if you end up stretching it and have a little extra, you can always pin it off. It's going to be but I try and match it as much as I can. It's nice to have a little bit of extra elastic at the end. And these should overlap at least 1/2 inch. And if you don't have a serger, you can do this with your sewing machine. Just use a zigzag. It works really well. So you can see where I stretched through the bottom. It should look like this, but then when pulled taut, it looks like that. And then your front shouldn't be gathered at all. It shouldn't be stretched at all. So I've applied it to one side, and now I'm going to do the other. Okay, now I have finished both of my leg openings applying elastic, and now I did look at the elastic measurements chart. And for my size, I cut out a 26-inch long strip of elastic, and I'm going to start at the back. See, I marked my back center point, but I'm going to need to quarter it because you will be stretching your waist elastic evenly. So my quarter points are my side seams. So now all I need to do is find my quarter points on my elastic. And even though you're stretching it evenly, if you have a certain area of your body that you feel you carry more weight in, so like for me, I can get kind of squishy in my tummy after eating a while, and that's just because I've had 5 kids, so I have extra skin there just from carrying the pregnancies. So anyways, the reason I'm talking about this is because you might want to stretch it a little less through those areas that you're more concerned about. So like right when I go near where I think my belly button is, I do try and not stretch it as much. And that's just because if you have an area where your elastic is tighter, then you can get that muffin top look where it's squishing your excess skin or fat, while like I don't really have as much above my butt and my back, so I do kind of stretch a little bit more there than I would like in my front. Having said all that, you're supposed to stretch it evenly. And you'll notice after your first where you like to have. So I just lay it down flat. You can go ahead and sew it in a loop if you want, but I just lay mine flat, and that's fine. And so now you're going to either use your zigzag or your serger and apply it on the wrong side of your lining. And I don't start stretching anything until I notice my needles have caught that elastic. So I set that elastic right next to where I want it, and now I see my needles have caught it, that there's some threads wrapped around it, so it's held in place now. And now I can start giving it a little bit of tug. You'll kind of learn once you've matched up where your point is. So you'll look at where your first point is that you need to meet, and you'll say, okay, that's about how much I need to stretch. And it's not a big stretch. So see, I have my blue mark right here. Well, I don't know how well you can see it. But I have a mark there, and I know I need to get to that side seam with that mark. So I'm stretching just the elastic, not the bottoms themselves. And so when I get to the end, you see I have this much remaining, so I'm going to need to stretch it until they overlap at least half an inch. And this is one of the reasons I don't go ahead and attach them together before I sew it, because if I've accidentally overstretched a little bit, then it's fine. I don't have to stretch my bikini to meet my elastic. I can just trim off whatever or sew it into the seam. See, I stretched mine a little bit more than half an inch, and it's fine. Okay, so now that I have all my elastics in, this is the easy part where you just get your whatever you're going to use to top stitch. So I do not have a cover stitch, so I use my regular machine for top stitching on Swim, and I think it looks just as good. I'm removing some of my basting stitches that got outside of my seam allowance because I really don't want them seen. So if you have basting stitches that you can see from the outside, go ahead and remove those. That's just where when I basted, I didn't do it within the serger seam allowance. So I'm going to remove those. Now we are just going to top stitch. So all you do to top stitch is you are turning it under to where your elastic is even like this. So your serge seam will be hidden on the lining side, and then we're going to zigzag all along the inside. So I'm going to change my bobbin thread to match the pretty right side of what I want to show on this other side while I'm stitching. Okay, so I am going to start in the crotch area, and I'm just going to fold it under, and I'm going to put on a zigzag. And my favorite's usually 2.5. You can also do a 3 width. It's a little bit wider, but I definitely do the 2.5 length. Just make sure you use the same stitch length and width throughout your bottom. So determine the one that's your favorite. And all I'm doing is turning under, and you only want to stretch it just the amount to where your elastic is even, because you don't want to be sewing like puckers into your fabric. You also don't want to overstretch them and stretch it out. So you're just stretching them to where your elastic is laying flat. And I'm going over my serge seam just to hold it down. And see, now I'm to the butt area of the bottoms. So I'm going to need to stretch it so I don't have all these little puckers in it. You see those puckers? And see, now I'm going to stretch it where it's like that. See, if I just sewed it normal, I would sew all these little puckers into it. But I'm going to make sure it's the elastic is a little stretched. Back stitch, and there you have it. And see, whenever it's on me, it's going to look like this. So I'm going to do that on my other two, and then we'll be finished. And there you have it. There's your done swim bottoms. You'll notice that your front lays kind of flat, while your back will look like this. But once it's going to stay on your bottom, and it's going to feel great. I'm going to remove some of my markings to mark the center, but I'm so excited. That was so quick.